Hello, folks, and thank you so much for joining me for the least optimized playthrough of Borderlands 2 that you ever have seen. We are on episode 15, if I'm not mistaken, out of 25, making our way through both the main game and some DLCs. We've got 4 Headhunter packs under our belt by this time, and this is our first DLC. And we have just met Captain Scarlet. That was the last thing we did on the last episode. We got to meet her, talk to her. I think we got a quest or two, and we are jumping in that part. So Captain Scarlet and her pirate's booty will be now the primary focus. We'll play this until it's gone. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we probably have one more episode from this DLC. I don't think we beat it this turn, or this time around. Because it is rather robust. We don't do a lot of the side quests, but it's a full-on DLC, so it's going to take a little bit of time. And then after that, we're going to be back to the main game for the duration until we do Tiny Tina's assault on Dragon Keep a little bit later on, towards the end of the game. And yeah, so that's that. So that is our roadmap. That's what we're going to be doing for the foreseeable future, or for the remainder of the game. I'm going to turn the volume down just a little bit. Yeah, there we go.
Good question. Glad to see you, taking the initiative. Second of all, Sandman's pretty strong and you're expendable as hell, so good luck.
See, and I've always thought, I don't know that I'd call it charming, but I always thought she was entertaining. I liked Captain Scarlet in terms of just the character in general. Some people didn't seem to. I actually was kind of surprised when I was doing I don't remember what I was looking for exactly, but I was doing something where I had to search for the DLC or search the name, and during my exploration, I found people that weren't necessarily thrilled of it, thought it was one of the weaker DLCs. I think for this game, it's one of the stronger ones. I think it's better than Torg's campaign. I like Torg as a character, but there's just too much about the campaign in general that I just didn't care for. And we're definitely in a bit of a pickle here. We're getting no bee love right now because our bee is depleted. So this is we just are somebody with no shield, and probably not going to get one for a very long time. And a sniper rifle. But hopefully we don't get overwhelmed. Because when you shoot like that, you really don't want to... You see how subtle that was? He was like walking away like, oh no, I'm done. If you weren't wary as I am, you would have got shot in the face as soon as you crested that dune. He was just waiting. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of love for it, and I don't know, aside from reusing some of the music from The Dust in the main game, and obviously, I mean, Borderlands, there are some areas that are 100% unique, or at least, a completely different color, but this type of landscape is very common, even from the first game, so I can't really criticize them for reusing assets or having it not. I mean, they're throwing palm trees in there, that's different. And once you further get into it, you're going to see, I think it's going to happen in this episode, because we're going after Sandman, and I'm pretty sure that's going to take us into some underground areas that look much different. I love the music. I love the aesthetic. It has I don't know, for whatever reason, I feel myself drawn to the pirate genre. I don't know why. Some people, zombies. I love zombies. Some people like post-apocalyptic, kind of. My understanding is Mad Max is not post-apocalyptic. It's just a different planet that just sucks. But they like that kind of, that aesthetic and that ambiance and that framework. And there are people like high fantasy. Some people like what they call low fantasy, sci-fi, sci-fantasy. There's all kinds of things. I personally, it's pirates, high fantasy, I think, because I think that's what they call Tolkien stuff is high fantasy. And then not really so much of the sci-fi. I'm beginning to really wonder. I realized early on, when I was still a diehard Star Wars fan, I would consider myself a diehard fan since from the time of ages 4 to 20. It was shortly after. I don't know if it would have happened anyway. I don't know if the prequels never came out. I don't know if I would have, if my fanhood, if I lost my fanhood that early. But I'm beginning to wonder just how much I like sci-fi, because there's very few other sci-fi properties that I actually enjoy. I recently came to find that without rereading the book, if the Dune movies are indicative of the content and the kind of approach of the Dune series, if they are more or less accurate, which I already know there's some inaccuracies there, and we talked about it at length on one of the live streams, and I got a good perspective, but I think it was a fair perspective, and this was his own perspective, which is that it is a story based around themes. The characters and the story itself, the narrative itself, are there to communicate and to articulate themes of various things. And the author's own statements seem to back that up as well, that he wanted to communicate, he wanted to speak to these themes. But unlike something like RoboCop, which I would argue definitely had some themes in there about, corporate greed and all kinds of things like that. Let's just...
What a surprise! Oh, sorry, I hacked into your Echo device shortly after we met, so I can see everything you can. I get horrifically bored.
That makes no
it's fun
sense.
to watch you kill people.
Yeah, so it's interesting that he didn't go any further, but you could hear that awkward laugh from Shade where it's like, oh wow, so you got him with his parched lips, and dried saliva, all his friends are dead. They don't look like they died from thirst, to be fair. And I mentioned this before, the corpses are very fresh and they look very healthy, especially for a Borderlands game where we know they have zombies and all kinds of visual, they don't shy away from showing graphic things. I'm not saying that I wanted them to, but not only do they not look dead, they also do, or decomposed in any way, shape, or form, which I guess in the dry desert air, they wouldn't necessarily decompose all that quickly. But not only that, but they don't look like they died of thirst. Dying of thirst is apparently a very... Well, dying of hunger is probably even worse. It's a much longer... Well, no, you would die of thirst before hunger, right? You can last 40 days without food, and even a little bit longer, but you can't go that long without water. So yeah, dying of hunger would definitely be a lot worse, I think. Let's not talk about that, because it really is just no fun. This is not like your best friend sleepover where you're just sitting there going, what would be the worst way to die? I don't know. We don't need to be doing that right now. It's a horrible, horrible question to ask, and it just... Okay, that's why. I was like, wow, this guy's pretty resilient. It's because he's a badass. He's going to die like a badass. He's also one level higher than us, so that does give him a little bit of edge, but not enough to withstand the power of my Pepe, my volcano rifle, with the power of Pepe the volcano. But anyway, what I was saying earlier, now it kind of escapes my mind, which sucks, because I was on a roll there for a second. Oh, because I started talking about Shade, and how, all his friends and everything, they're like, they're all dead, I'm almost dead, and you see the difference here. I think that was a badass pirate, if I'm not mistaken. 2 shots with our Bee-enhanced rifle, so that's just how powerful it is. Where you saw it before, it took like 6 or 7 shots. And see, this is what the running water, the lighting they did here. It's not realistic. I mean, the water wouldn't glow.
Oasis is dying of thirst. Otherwise, the sight of that enormous spring might fill me with a tragic rage.
Oh wait. Oh, there's one part where he does that laugh, and then he think he's done. He's like, he goes crazy a little bit. Kind of, that's why I was saying if they were to do a true Borderlands sequel, let's forget the third one never happened. Let's pretend the third one never happened. I would be down with it just to see like what happens. Where's Shade now? Is he down here? What? Because I like this atmosphere. That's what I was saying. I like the pirate aesthetic, and that's what I was saying before I got off on the Shade tangent, where he just kind of. At first, you're like, oh, wow, he's going to address it, and then he just kind of moves on from it. It's like, man, this would totally blow your mind. You suffer all of that, and you realize right underneath the desert, essentially, is this gorgeous, beautiful oasis. And we were seeing a little bit of what would become, I think, Bam Bam Island. But I like this more than Wham Bam Island. Yeah, I like waterfalls. I like pretty water. I like the lighting effects here. The soft orange and yellow glows from torches and stuff. It's just kind of cool. But like I was saying, I like for some reason I'm drawn to the pirate aesthetic. I was questioning whether or not I actually like science fiction, because I always thought I did because I like Star Wars. But then I heard people say Star Wars isn't science fiction, it's science fantasy, because it does have those elements. And I think that's what draws me to it, is those fantastical elements, that it's not like sci-fi is so much about the science. And while I do appreciate that, and I kind of like Star Trek's, where it's like, okay, we're actually going to try to explain how the warp drive works. We're going to explain how these things work. I kind of geek out over that kind of stuff. But I find that the people part of science fiction doesn't appeal to me. Dune, I didn't like any of the people. I liked, at least in the movie version, I can't remember the character from the book, but I liked the king, or the duke, or whatever he was, the Paul's dad. I liked him well enough. He seemed like a really nice guy. But that's when I was like, I couldn't remember while I'm watching the movie, and I can't remember what happens next. But I'm like, he's too nice to stick around. Like, he's too benevolent. He's too kind. People only usually do that, or those kind of characters almost always bite the big one early. And that's, making them really nice and benevolent is partly how we make their deaths more impactful, but also just in general. I mean, he may very well just been a very good character, but if he was allowed to live, then the tragedy that compels the story forward would not happen, or would lose its impact. So you can't have that going. But anyway, and if all the people are to be believed that I've seen defending the movie or saying they enjoyed the movie, it is relatively faithful to the book. I still think you have Cheney is a minimal character, and I don't think I've ever heard people say when they're talking about adapting a property, even just having a movie based on a book or a movie based on any source material. I've never heard anybody say, yeah, the author didn't give that character enough time. That they didn't explore that character, didn't flesh out that character enough. This movie corrects that. Because the idea is, as a writer, you are focusing on a character as much as necessary while focusing on the things that you really want to promote, whether it's the growth of your primary character and you don't want to detract from that, or you're like, hey, I want this to be a certain length, and if I don't want another 5 pages of character development for this character. If I'm going to do that, I would rather flesh out this particular scene a little bit more. I'd rather have, engage in that a little bit. So the idea that that's a valid criticism, that this character didn't get enough love in the book, and so the movie is writing that wrong. I think the author kind of knew what they're doing, because as we see it is now, as people will admit to me, there's so much more in the books than we see in the movie. But yet the movie chose, instead of including more of those moments, or instead of fleshing out some more of the concepts, it chose instead to give a relatively minor character a more major role. The problem is, they don't give her more impact in the story, which is, I would say, is actually a good thing. But then it's like, okay, you're giving her more prominence, but there's no payoff for it. It's like, oh wow, Paul's having these visions of her, which I have to read the book. Maybe that's a part of the actual book. I don't remember that being a thing, but it's like they really hype up the love story, and then at the end of Dune 2, it's like, okay, that's gone, and it doesn't align with where the books left the story at that point, or the book left the story at that point. And so I remember liking the book, how it ended, and then I read how the series continues, and I was like, this isn't for me. And I later find out, okay, he was really Herbert was trying to communicate some themes. But then the director decided, apparently the director decided that because people like myself, after reading the first book, thought Paul was a pretty cool dude, and he was making the best out of a tough decision, or making the best out of a tough situation, we weren't supposed to root for him. He's a tragic hero, but not in a good way. Not a tragic hero that simply succumbs to circumstance, but a tragic hero who makes either a bad or selfish decision at the cost of greatness, not personal greatness, but it's like Macbeth. Macbeth is a tragic story because of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but the decisions he made were trying to avoid that fate, and maybe that's part of what we see in. I don't know. There's just so much. It's hard to sift through my memories of the book, what people's commentaries of the book have, what the author has said about his own work later on, what the movie did.
Way back when Sandman and I were like this. Oh, right. You can't see through the radio. I'm crossing my first 2 fingers.
Well, wait a minute, Captain Scarlet. Here we go. We were just told that Shade can see us because he hacked into our communicator. You're using our communicator, so in theory, since we're choosing to communicate with you, you should not be able to see any less than what a hacked communicator is showing. So Shade can see us and our adventures somehow through our hacked communicator, but you can't see us and we can't see you through the same communicator. It's still a funny line. It's still a funny thing. That's same thing Frasier, in one of the episodes, he says, it's not a matter of what's important is not what's here, but what is here. For those of you who can't see, I'm pointing at my heart right now. And of course, he's doing a radio show, so nobody can see it. So but it was just funny because he's having this very profound moment. He's like, "It's what matters here." I'm pointing at my chest right now. It's just, I don't know, it was kind of funny, and awareness as well, because we as the audience can see what he's doing, and so it doesn't necessarily, we don't necessarily think, oh, the audience can't see it. But then, of course, as a writer, if you have a brain, you're going, oh, yeah, well, no, radio audience wouldn't be able to see this. And you can make a little joke about it. I'm not trying to say it's a brilliant thing. It's just kind of a funny aside. Anywho, but the bottom line with it, I don't want to go too far into Dune. But, you know, that's I think, considered a classic sci-fi book. Normie the Mixed Up Robot. Not Normie. Norby, I think is the actual name, the Mixed Up Robot, Isaac Asimov. I think I remember liking that book as well, but I think there are other books in the series, they take it in another direction. So it's always this kind of, you know, there's a dearth of likable characters usually I find in sci-fi and like general sci-fi. Like I find personally, and I know I'm stepping over all kinds of toes, but this is just, it's my point of view. I mean, there's plenty of people who don't like these franchises. I'm only exploring it because, as I said, I have fancied myself a sci-fi fan because of my enjoyment of Star Wars, but now I'm thinking maybe Star Wars was the outlier because it had hope and it had likable characters. Star Trek, I just find everybody to be such a pompous person. They're all, especially Next Generation, at least the little bit that I've seen of the original Trek, you know, you had Spock being a little bit of you know, because of his nature and how he is, you know, has to be emotionally shut down. And so he seems a bit more, you know, stick up the old butt type a deal. But, you know, and Jim meant well, but he was crotchety, you know, he had, but he was, you know, rough around the edge. He's kind of like that relative you have that's, you like to hang out with him, but he sometimes says things. He's kind of just depending, you're not going to go to him for sympathy necessarily, and you're not going to go to him because you want to share your feelings, but he's a cool dude that just kind of keeps his stuff low key. Now, I may be way off base on Bones. I don't know. I haven't seen much of it, so y'all can correct me. But I thought him just being a little bit crotchety, a little bit kind of like, he's kind of grumpy, but not a bad guy, and has moments where you're like, oh, he really does care. And you had Kirk, who just seemed like just a dude trying to keep his people alive, and you know, trying to make his way through the galaxy, and being a ladies' man and whatever. Which, you know, that part I could take or leave that, but like the Next Generation, just everybody seemed to. I mean, I like Geordi. Geordi seemed cool. Data, I mean, he's a computer, or he's a you know, android, or what, I don't know exactly what the correct sci-fi term is, but I mean, he's limited by that. Worf, I kind of like Worf. Maybe it was just Picard. He just came across as kind of a pompous doofus. Not a doofus as in a moron. I shouldn't say that, because I want my words to reflect my actual feelings. Pompous, yes. Little self-righteous, yeah. And I think that translated. Like, you get some of that from the Doctor as well. Gates McFadden is her name, the actress's name. I can't remember the actual character name. But and then Wesley, you know, as a kid, you know, the few times that I watched, we used to watch it as a family. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Watch that, and life goes on every Sunday night, UPN 20, I think it was. So I mean, I liked it as a kid, and of course, it was in that age group where I thought Wesley was the coolest guy ever, and I was kind of old enough at that point to know that acting was a thing and that I wanted to do the acting deal, and so I was jealous of the actor, Will Wheaton. Because it was like, man, like he's a young guy, but he gets to be on these sets and do these things and interact with these cool people and these cool props, and that's like the dream come true. So I think I was a little bit more in awe of and jealous of Will Wheaton versus Wesley Crusher, but still, you know, it's like, okay, you get to be this kind of cool character that a lot of people, as I found out later, especially adults, were like, But again, same kind of thing, just that the sense of I know everything, I have the upper hand when it comes to morality and all this kind of thing. And there's just kind of comes across as pompous and self-righteous is the general vibe I get, especially when dealing with people that aren't riding around in a mobile heaven. I mean, like, let's face it, if you lived in a world where you could have anything you wanted to eat at any time, you could have anything you wanted to drink at any time, you had a medical facility that, barring some crazy, outlandish alien species, technology, or weapon, could cure you of pretty much whatever ails you with a quick shot or a little thing. It wasn't like you had to go through the surgeries. You don't have to go through chemo. They can just wipe stuff out just by injecting you with something, and you're good to go. And you could live out any fantasy you wanted on the holodeck. anything you wanted to do. It's just like doing it in real life, just obviously without real world consequences. But they really don't draw a line and say, oh, well, yeah, holodeck's good for this. Maybe they do. But I don't remember there ever being well, here's the limitations of it. Now, there was the episode, I think, where the holodeck became real. And I think they could die for real. And they were trying to escape the holodeck. But in general, without that bit of quirkiness, the holodeck was just, it was a fun thing. You could just do whatever you wanted. So you don't even have to be rich in that world to be able to live the life of luxury. And really, I don't even know if they made a distinction between real food and not. Like, I mean, if you ate in the holodeck, did it nourish your body somehow? I mean, if the holodeck can become real to a degree, if it can kill you, you'd think that would mean it could help you. But there's flaws in that logic. So I would be surprised if they put forward that the holodeck would alleviate you of the need to find food and water. So you'd have to get out of the holodeck at least to do your job if you're on the starship and feed yourself. But I mean, when all your needs are met, and even what you could argue are most of your wants, when you really want for nothing, for the most part. I mean, humans, I believe we can be greedy no matter how much we have. But when your immediate needs are met, and even your need for entertainment is pretty much can be you can do just by yourself, just by saying, hey, computer, do this simulation of this situation and whatever else, and make me the hero. You can play out your craziest fantasies or whatever else in this fantastical world. So like video games on steroids really is what it is. Then you're taking away the reason why we have a huge chunk of why we have so much pain, suffering, and strife on Earth. That is almost what we think of when we think of heaven. Everything you could ever want is addressed. Unless you go way out of your lane, you're not going to encounter anything that's going to take your life. Any possible illness that you can conceive of is almost immediately and instantly, those are the same words, is almost immediately taken away. So you don't really have to deal with that. Really, it's just your love life, and even then, like I said, you've got the holodeck or whatever the equivalent is on planet that can make anything you want come true, which I'm sure would have a lot of people spending more time in a holodeck type thing than in real life, which isn't necessarily good, but there you have it. At least in the holodeck, unlike some of like anime, like Sword Art Online, where you're essentially laying down the entire time, and it's all the impulses from your brain are rerouted into this system that then allows you to interact with the environment virtually. In the holodeck, you're actually still walking around. You're still doing the things. Now, how they do all that with it being in a limited space, I don't know, but obviously there's ways. Pretty easy, actually, especially when you factor in like what AI can do. It could just essentially, it makes the layout in such a way in the corridors and everything where you're without knowing it, you're kind of walking in a big circle in a big loop. Like you think you're walking 10 miles, and you are, but it's having you make a right here and a left here and a right, and so it's kind of bringing you back around, and it's the distance, but it's all within the confines of the deal. But it's done in such a creative way, and the landscape is always changing, so you never feel like you're being guided around the walls or the parameters of the. Anyway, so I always found that interesting. They didn't have that feature, I don't think, in the original Star Trek. So at least that aspect, you can say, okay. And I don't even know if the food and beverage thing was taken care of the way it is in Next Generation. Next Generation really was, literally the Next Generation really was this huge upgrade. And it made any kind of like, just this detachment from the struggles and pain and mindset of people on other planets who don't have all those luxuries. It made it that much more detached and that much more ridiculous. But again, that's my. I remember liking it as a kid, and then I bought the series on DVD when I was like 27, 28, which had been I really hadn't seen it since I was like 12 or 13. So I was like, hey, cool, I can revisit it, and. I thought I read somewhere people are saying, it takes a season or two to catch its stride. Like season 2 is amazing, and then it just gets better. But I got through like season 3, and I'm like, it just got old. Like I was like, you guys are a bunch of jerks, Like I stopped preaching at the galaxy from your your heavenly bliss, where you have really no stake in the game most of the time. And all you do every time you come across something that's actually like, the other thing too is like, if you weren't one of the main crew, you were there so that Picard could say, oh, I do this for my crew, I do this for my crew. But it's like, the story never cares about your crew. You don't care about your crew. We never really see true loss or the effect of the death of the red shirts. You know, the people that always go down and always get killed and butchered. They're there they're the, you know, the ice box, or the refrigerated characters. They're the ones that are created just to die so that it gives, you know, everybody else a reason to care or to feel grief or to be like, well, you need to stand up to this thing or whatever. But you never really feel like Picard, and there may be an episode or maybe a few that he does do this, but because I haven't seen all of them. But everything that I saw and everything I remember, there was never a time where I really felt that Picard understood or felt the loss of the people who died in that episode, or in any of the episodes. It was, unless it was one of the main crew people, unless they were in danger or they died or they were injured. Because there was that one, the gal that wanted off of Star Trek, and she was, I think she was the security chief. And she wanted off, so they killed her off, and I think she regretted it later. But like, we felt that. And the crew felt that, and you knew Picard felt that. Like everybody, it was a lot of weight to it. But otherwise, it's like, okay, or you see the torpedo tear through the ship, and you see the guys get sucked out into space. They're there for the visual effect. They're there to be like, hey, people died. But there's never, I don't feel like there's any weight given to it. It really makes it disingenuous when I hear the captain talk, oh, my crew, I care about my crew. You care about the people that are on the bridge with you. You care about the people that we see and interact with. But as long as they're okay, I don't really get... When you make your decisions, I don't feel like you're actually doing it with the lives of your crew in mind. I feel like you're doing it as somebody who has plot armor, and you know that you don't really have to worry about it. Like, if you genuinely felt like your life or the life of your crew, like the people that you actually care about, was in jeopardy, I don't think you'd be giving the benefit of the doubt to something that has already killed like 3 people. You know, it just didn't resonate with me, I guess, is the point. And I'd be happy to be wrong. Oh man, I remember I looked for this stupid thing for so long. Oh my gosh. It was either that one or there's one other thing. It was just like, it was just so well hidden. And I was losing my mind because it's like, it's supposed to be right here, but I keep going up and down and up and down. And I'm looking all over the place and I'm thinking, is it up there? Is it down in the water somewhere? And it was behind the waterfall. So anyway, with my apparent or current disdain, yeah, that's probably a fair word, for very popular science fiction properties like Star Trek, like Dune, and for pretty much everything but the original trilogy of Star Wars and the expanded universe, much of the expanded universe. I was like, maybe I'm just not a sci-fi guy. And I guess would the Terminator series be considered sci-fi? I like the first and the second one. I like Alien. Well, I like Alien okay. I like Aliens. But I feel like that's more of an action / kind of horror movie. Suspense thriller, maybe. And same thing with Terminator. You know, it has sci-fi elements, but is it really truly sci-fi by the definition of the word? I don't know. If it is, then yes, I do like some sci-fi properties. But on the whole, Avatar, zero interests. I don't know if that's sci-fi or if that's sci-fantasy or what, but... You know, and I'm not... So bottom line is... Always thought of myself as sci-fi kind of nerd geek guy. But once my love for Star Wars kind of petered out. Well, that's timing for you, isn't it? Petered out, and then there's a look at some naughtiness. I mean, not really. Then I began to question, I began to look, give a really hard look at the properties that I do like and the things that I do like and go, okay, well, would these qualify as sci-fi, or do I just not get the appeal of the genre? Regardless, I've always found pirates to be fascinating, and I honestly couldn't tell you. I think some of it's the idea. Oh, maybe this is the one that I was having a hard time finding. Yeah, I was having a hard time finding this too, because I didn't realize that the bottle would actually open the gate. That's our fastball right there. That's why I love that fastball. One shot, so many critters. I think I thought this was the way in there. Did I not see the X? I saw the X there. Please tell me I see the X. Dude, look at the ground. Oh, this is painful. Look down, savage beast. Look down. There it is. There it is. Look, you can't. Okay, thank you. Oh, my goodness gracious. Isn't that the most bizarre thing? Like, while I'm playing it, I am, it's obviously right in the middle of my field of view, and I missed it. And yet, as a spectator, I'm like, oh, there it is, right there, just casually observing. Which is why, you know, when I can't find something, I swear up and down it doesn't exist, it's not there, and then somebody like moves something like that's right there, or in that case, it's dude, it's right there in front of you. No, it's not. I can't. Oh, yeah, okay, there it is. Just as it reminds me that my memory is not infallible. Hey, and as I'm saying here now, as I'm talking about the things that I'm remembering, I could be misremembering Trek. I could be having it in some negative light for some reason that it doesn't deserve. Same thing with Dune. But I just saw the movies. So I don't know about the books, but I know the movie doesn't work for me. And again, the director said, and I'm pretty sure Herbert said, that people didn't quite, as I mentioned before, people didn't quite get the fact that Paul is not supposed to be the good guy. And I have a hard time in general with properties that either A, do not have a likable protagonist, or B, just don't have a likable character in general. Like, if I don't like any of the characters, if I don't think any of them are making good decisions or are trying to, you know, do the right thing, even if they're failing, then I just have no interest. There's nobody I'm rooting for. I'm like, you can all die. I don't care. Like, I really am not invested in any of you, any of your plots. I think you're all a bunch of selfish turd muffins, and you get whatever is coming to you because you're not even trying to conduct yourself in a way that puts you in a position to make good decisions. You're making a lot of dumb decisions. You're lying. You're obfuscating the truth. You're backstabbing. You're betraying, and it's setting you up for failure in multiple ways. And so when that failure does eventually get to you, que sera. You deserve it. You know, you deserve everything that's coming to you. And so I don't like that. I like to be able to at least root for one person, or I like to be able to root for at least one person. And or the protagonist, which would count as that one person, needs to be somebody that I'm invested in what they're doing, and I'm like, I want to see you succeed. If we're not supposed to be rooting for Paul, we're supposed to be seeing what he's doing as a mistake, as a morally wrong thing, which I really didn't get. But if that is the case, then I don't like Paul either, and there's really nobody. I certainly don't like Cheney. I don't like Jessica, and she's part of the manipulation of power that is screwing up everything. So there's really no likable characters per se. But from what I understand, I think the director was saying that the Cheney, well, she had a very minor role in the book, which was fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It wasn't about her. It wasn't her story. I think she gets a more prominent role later on, which is fine. You know, if that's what the story dictates, then great. But that she was given more of a prominent role because for some reason it was a problem that she didn't have one, and because she was supposed to be the moral compass for the audience. And I've said before, I don't think characters as representatives are a good idea. And I don't think characters that have to provide a function. It's one thing to say this is the character through which we see it's through their eyes that we see the story. So it's a child, you know, interacting with the adult world, but the child is the protagonist. So we're seeing these events and everything from that child's perspective. That's fair. That's just, you know, you're telling it from the perspective of your protagonist. That's not a big deal. But when you're saying, oh no, this character represents, or this character needs to embody the moral compass for the audience, then you sacrifice the character. The character becomes more one-dimensional and disingenuous, not true to the character. In the book, Cheney is loyal to Paul, and whether she sees problems in his plan or not, she sticks with him. She loves him, and she's on board. And I think even that they changed some stuff in her history a little bit, because I think in the books she's like a half-breed, like she's half Outworlder and half native or something, whereas in the movie they make her like 100% of the world of Dune, or Arrakis, what have you, which obviously changes her perspective on Outworlders. And so they made some changes that just they're incongruous or at odds with the story that the book tells. And whereas the book, when it ends, has them together and moving forward together, and kind of has solidified their relationship, the movie has them now separated. And while you could argue that she still loves him and he loves her, she has decided that it's conditional, and unless he changes his mind, unless he comports himself in a different way, or unless he has a different way of moving forward, unless he sides with her, does what she would like him to do, that she is not interested in being with him. Now, how that's going to change, and we don't know what's going to happen in the next part. I know for a fact that I won't be watching the third part. Maybe it'll redeem itself. Maybe it'll turn things around. I have no interest. I watched the second one. I liked the first one enough to be curious about what happens in the second part, and then the second one I was like, eh. Like there never felt, it was really weird. I never felt like an emotional connection to anybody per se. Like there was never a point where I'm like, oh, I really feel like it's like either I don't like the character, or they don't do enough to really bring that moment to a conclusion. Which I will admit, I could be very well be the only person in the world who feels this way about this movie, because what I saw was just unequivocal praise for it for the most part. And even people who had a negative thing to say or had a different perspective said, oh no, I mean, I agree that it's a masterpiece and I agree that it's all these amazing things. And I will agree, it is cinematography-ish, as a moving picture, literally a moving picture. It's nice enough. The effects are great. They do something different with the music, and I think it does work. I think they have a little too much chanting. Maybe that's in the book too, but everybody seems to be very musical and very musically inclined. A lot of hums and ums and ums. And again, maybe that's in the book, and that's fine. But it just still felt a little weird to have everybody bursting into some kind of chant or hum. But yeah, so again, Dune, another beloved sci-fi franchise that doesn't work for me.
Sir Hammerlock here with a bit of a job for you. I've heard.
Oh, thank you, Sir Hammerlock. We are reading you.
Sneaking around Hater's Folly, stealing treasure, slicing off faces, and the like. Sounds terribly interesting. Hunt it down, would you?
I do believe we take that mission. I like take down individual. Like if it's like take down 10 skags, not my thing. But if you give it a name, if you give the character a name and a motivation, and in theory probably some voice lines and its own little avatar thing, then I get interested. So this is a big baddie, and so I think that the allure of tackling that appeals to me now. I think that's, yeah. I was just making sure Grendel was selected, and we're going after Grendel. So yeah, so I'm not sure, because it seems like sci-fi as a whole, like Blade Runner, same thing. I don't get Blade Runner. I'm striking out for some people. I'm striking out like mad here. I'm naming properties. Like, I love these things. Like, I get it. I'm not saying any of these movies are bad or badly done, or that Star Trek: The Next Generation was badly done. There's an element of, I don't know. I think Star Trek is supposed to have hope, which I kind of get a little bit here and there, but overall, a lot of the movies anyway there was a very dystopian, disenfranchised future. And while I can certainly relate to that to a degree, because the way the world's going now, it's not in some ways it's the dystopian discussed by movies like that, or themed, or visited, or explored by these different franchises. There's a lot of other things that are coming into play now that they didn't have to deal with. Still, I don't know that I would trade our prospects for theirs, but it still comes with its own very surprising craziness. And you go, yeah, and without some kind of redemption, without some kind of renaissance, without some kind of drastic change, our future is truly very bleak. And that is the unfortunate illusion of progression, is that moving forward and becoming better means removing barriers. And I've said this many times in many ways, but there are some barriers that should come down. There are some barriers that can come down, but should come down gradually. And instead we tear them down, and it screws a lot of things up. And there's some barriers that need to stay there. There's some barriers that's like, just because, what was it, Malcolm's line? They were so obsessed over figuring out whether it was something they could do, they never stopped to think if it was something they should do. And I think very few of us, honestly, myself included, very few of us would say, I don't want there to be dinosaurs. I think all of us would be like, I think that'd be pretty cool to bring back dinosaurs, to actually see what dinosaurs really look like, especially now that we have, I grew up, dinosaurs looked a certain way. This was science evidence back based on the skeletons and all these things. These are exactly what these prehistoric monsters look like. And now they're like, no, they were all birds. They were bird-like. They all had bird-like features. They evolved from avians, so they're all bird-like, or they were the predecessors of avians, or some form of of bird, so they're more bird-like, and they look more like chickens than what we think of as raptors. Anyway, the point being, it would be nice to put that debate to rest once for all. Like, I mean, I don't care. I'm not invested either way, whether it's a chicken-looking thing or whether it's a reptile. I'd be cool to know. It'd be cool to see one, something that hasn't walked the earth. Then again, you go, yeah, there was a reason why it stopped existing, and it would be one of the few critters that, at least for the most part, could not be blamed on humans. It wasn't. We didn't hunt them to extinction, but there was some event, the Ice Age, meteor, whatever the prevailing thing is. Obviously, bringing them back will not solve that bit of the puzzle. But yeah, I think very few of us would be opposed to the idea of exploring the possibilities of bringing back dinosaurs, at least to some degree, in a measured degree. I mean, again, on an island. Put them on an island. They can't go anywhere. If things get out of hand, they're on this island. We just nuke the island or just leave it alone and let them do their thing. We just don't go there. But then you see how it turns out, and you go, yeah, there was a lot of sabotage, a lot of betrayal, some stupidity, a lot of greed, and that we wouldn't necessarily have all that. Okay, now this is the part that I struggled with before, because as you can see, I'm struggling with it now. I have no idea. You can see there's that beacon there, and there's the little bit of gradient there that says there's something beyond where you are now, but you can't get to it. And I'm like, do I need to go higher? There's nothing that tells you elevation. You don't know. So, unfortunately, I think we've got about 13 minutes left. I think it is going to end with us killing Grendel. Spoiler alert. But I think it's because it's going to take us 10 more minutes to find the gosh darn place. And honestly, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea where it is right now. So it'll be fun for all of us to see exactly where this thing is. But yeah, there's few places in Borderlands where I remember having to go to like a readme or a walkthrough or something, because I'm like, where the crap is this? And I'm always happy to find somebody that's made a YouTube video or has made it a point to say what, to give you the instructions, because it makes me realize, okay, I wasn't alone. Okay, never mind. It wasn't that hard. I remember it being hard, though. I remember it being very difficult. Somehow I became a genius between now and then. I took the right path somehow. But just know that there was a time where I did struggle. But I got good. This is the theme. So anywho. But yeah, Blade Runner shows like that. Again, a lot of these things that are hailed critically or hailed by people. I'm not saying this is the reason why people like them, but usually one of the first things I hear is the cinematography. In fact, the only reason I ever saw Blade Runner, the original, was because I had a friend who was a director of photography, and he was like, "You've got to see this. It's the most amazing. It's so visually amazing. Everything is so great." And I knew, okay, that's going to be rough for me, because I really, that's like probably one of the things I care least about. I care about people and about stories and about progression and those types of things. And I'm not saying that as in that's better than visuals, because I mean, movies are a visual medium. If you're not taking advantage of what it is and being showing people vistas and amazing things and cool visuals, then it could be argued you're missing out on a lot of the point of the medium. But that's what I gravitate towards. So I don't need the best lighting. I don't need the most amazing locations. It's like, okay, that's really pretty, but get me to the meat of the story. Get me to the contest. Get me what's going on. And so unless the background or the setting takes away from the feel or the vibe of the characters and their journeys, I'm okay with minimizing its impact, or minimizing the time and the effort and the money spent on it. But anyway, that to say, we watched it and I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. It has a lot of really cool visuals, but the story falls flat for me. I'm like, I don't. Okay, and then it's like, well, and then I'm one of these people. I like, unless the point of the story is to put you in a moral quandary, I don't like it being open-ended. I don't mind if the Prestige, I think, to a degree, left a lot for you to think about afterwards, because it has that revelation at the end. You're like, whoa, wait, what does that mean exactly? And when Hugh Jackman's character says, I did sacrifice, I suffered. I didn't know. Every night I went into the trick not knowing if I was going to be on the stage, or if I was going to. I mean, for those of you who don't know, I mean, it's a bit of a spoiler alert. So yeah, spoiler alert, big spoiler alert. If you haven't watched The Prestige, I highly recommend it, but don't listen to the next minute or two of this discussion. I'll give you a wave when I'm done. But, you know, at the end, when you find out that this trick he does that involves seemingly some kind of genuine magic or scientific shenaniganery, that he creates a clone of himself, and either he, as the original, or the clone is transported, one of them is left on stage and gets all the glory and the accolades. The other one ends up in a water tank under the stage and drowns to death. Very horrible, very gruesome, very terrifying. But because it clones the character up until the very moment that duplication transpires, you don't know. He's never able to really know if person A or version A is the one that, like, when it clones you, does it transport your clone into that place on stage where eventually he gets drowned, or does it transport the duplicate, or does it transport the original and leave a clone standing there? So functionally, for the audience, for the world, the character never dies, but he knows, and why he chose to just kill his clone every single time instead of having them go off and live their life somewhere else, I don't know. But, you know, that's within the story. But he never knows until the trick happens, and by then it's too late. He doesn't know, is it me or is it going to be my clone who ends up in the thing? And the only way to differentiate them is actually no, there is no way to differentiate. So he doesn't. Yeah. So either it's a brand new him, it's a clone of him every single time he does a trick, or he's just been killing clones of himself the whole time. But he doesn't know until it happens. And then when it does happen, he has all the same memories. So even then, when he's in that tank, he doesn't know, was I really the guy who was just doing this magic trick who was here 10 minutes ago? Or am I brand new and this is my fate? You know, he doesn't know. So again, it's a mind game, and it took me a while to sort all that out. So here, done with the spoiler. So, you know, I like things like that don't exactly explain everything. It's not a cliffhanger necessarily. It's not a moral quandary, but it is really, you kind of got to think about the implications of it and how it works out. At least I did. It didn't become immediately obvious. But to me, it's a bit lazy if you end a story and like in Blade Runner, was he an android or not? I've heard both sides. I've heard the speculation on both sides. And to me, it does kind of make a difference in the story to a degree from what I remember of it. Again, it kind of slipped my brain, but I guess in theory, because as somebody who is focused on story and focused on character, it's kind of a big deal if that character is a human being and therefore has this particular view and fate in this world, or if he is what do they call it, a synthetic? I think that's the word they actually use. Or if he's a synthetic, and therefore that's going to change his interactions and his future and his life in this world. Because they're not the same thing. They're very different.
He was like this big. Oh, bloody, I keep forgetting these things don't have video. I'm holding my arms really far apart.
Scarlet. Scarlet. You beautiful, beautiful lady. You'll get that in a little bit. Creepy dude. Really creepy dude. What was I gonna say? Yeah, so if it matters to the character, it matters to me. And if you leave it open-ended, whether it's the fate of the character, the nature of the character, anything like that, I'm not going to say it is lazy, because the filmmaker may be like, well, I have this idea, but it in a way, like, why would you do that? Because so either as a filmmaker you're saying this aspect of the story doesn't matter, in which case I would say it undercuts a lot of the stories and a lot of things. Like Blade Runner, if it doesn't matter whether he's a synthetic or a human, then what is what is life, what is synthetic, what is reality? Like, I mean, I think I remember somebody telling me like the themes of Blade Runner are these things, but if you don't actually care, if it doesn't matter that Harrison Ford's character is synthetic or not, then. But if it does matter, then I think as the storyteller, it's important to say which one he is. It's important to make that known, whether in a definitive way. It doesn't have to be an obvious way, but a definitive way. I actually wanted to tell a story. I'm giving away a plot idea here, or a story idea here, but you all are friends. I trust you, and I haven't written it yet.
Probably gonna kill each other later, but for now, I just want to say.
Well, let's just say this in a whodunit mystery kind of thing.
treasure.
if I were to write one, it would be at the very end. I wouldn't tell you who did it. The movie would not expressly tell you who did it. And because of the story I'm telling, it actually is okay because it's not somebody who has to go to prison or anything like that. It's not a punitive type story. It's not a whodunit murder. It's kind of just a whodunit, but in a way that, like, having that person not be dead or in prison is not a bad thing. So, but you do a whodunit story, and the movie doesn't expressly tell you, but if you're paying attention to the clues, if you're paying attention, like I was doing a lot of research to figure out, hey, you know, like I remember one of the first things I researched, does alcohol actually, if you throw a lit match or a cigarette into alcohol, does it catch fire? Because in theory, alcohol is flammable, I think. But it has to be like pure alcohol, like 100% alcohol or something. It can't have any water in it. It was something like that. It can happen, but I think it needs to be a spark, or it would be very unlikely, given the kind of alcohol that people drink and the flammability of a cigarette. It would be highly unlikely, if not impossible, for a cigarette to catch fire. Whereas that was going to be one of the clues, was if you're paying attention, when he throws his cigarette in this what you think of as an alcoholic beverage, it doesn't burst into flame. That's a subtle hint that wasn't actually alcohol, and therefore, perhaps, the alcoholism that he seems to be suffering from is all a show. So stuff like that. But then I realized, okay, that doesn't work because alcohol shouldn't burst into flame. So it would be something where it's not going to be movie magic, and it's like only in the world of the movie do these clues make sense. It would be genuine, like, okay, well, you think it's this guy, but then you realize that the guy who did it didn't have a bandaged arm or something, but this guy did. So, in other words, in theory, as a process of elimination, you as the audience could figure out who the person of interest actually is. But the movie would never tell you. It wouldn't end on a shot of that person or anything you'd see. It would end on shots of all the different people that are left, and it would just be kind of like this open-ended thing. But the whole point would be, you figure it out. I've given you the clues. It's not open-ended. There is a right answer. If you really get down to it, there is not going to be 2 people or 3 people. It couldn't be multiple people. That's not the point. The point is, it is somebody. But just as if you were a character in that story in general, life doesn't just give you the answer. It doesn't just present it to you and say, hey, this is what the answer is. You, just like that person in the story, just a passerby or somebody else. You know, in other words, like Batman. Like, if you don't know Bruce Wayne is Batman, would you ever think that Bruce Wayne is actually Batman? Would that ever occur to you? In this story, you don't know, like, the people, even though they may have interacted with the person of interest, unless they're in the know, they're not going to really know. It wouldn't occur to them. And so I wanted to give that same feeling to the audience, where you're just one of the people in the story. You don't know any more than they do in that regard. And so you get to figure it out for yourself, if you so desire. Otherwise, you just watch the movie on face value, and this is what happens in it. So anyway, I like to write that, but that's the only kind of open-ended I would want to leave the audience with, because I think it's important, if the character does matter, and if their fate does matter, which you'd like to think it does, then I think it's important for the author to tell you their story, not leave it up to your interpretation. Well, do they actually live or die? Or is he actually a human being, or is he not? Or I mean, it seems to me to be lazy, but maybe that's not an accurate motivation. I just don't know why you would choose to leave that out, and where it can't be definitively decided. Like I said, as long as you leave enough clues where, okay, if you pay attention to the story enough, or if you're familiar enough with it, then you'll understand, or then you'll know the answer. But from what I can tell with, like, Blade Runner, you can watch the movie 35,000 times, watch all the different commentaries, and you still really don't know definitively which way it is. But anyway, that's all the time we got for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, thanks for watching, and goodbye.